Hello and thank you for joining us. Turkish troops have crossed into northern Iraq in pursuit of Kurdish fighters. It's not clear just how big the offensive is, but it's the first significant ground attack following months of isolated airstrikes and cross-border incursions. The US and Europe have urged Turkey to show restraint. From Istanbul, Lawrence Lee reports.
Turkey had been threatening this for months, but it still caught everyone by surprise. The airstrikes of Thursday had followed a pattern, but then overnight some 10,000 troops followed up, and fighting has now been reported in several locations in PKK hotspots close to the border inside northern Iraq. Turkey's foreign minister said this should be seen as a continuation of a pattern, though in truth it is bigger and therefore more provocative than previous recent raids on PKK rebels. The Turkish government has been quick to point out that it told the Americans it was going to do this, yet the official line from Washington is that this isn't good news and does represent an escalation in the fighting. Nonetheless, President Bush has already accepted that the PKK represents a common enemy to both countries, and so it's impossible to believe that Washington didn't give the go-ahead to at least a short-term military operation. Turkish Prime Minister Erdogan addressed the nation, saying that the operation was limited only to PKK camps. He claimed international support and said Turkish troops would return home as soon as their mission was accomplished. In truth, that could mean any time at all.
I have spoken to President Bush and informed him about the operation. In the meantime, we are in touch with local administrations in northern Iraq. Our armed forces will be back after they reach their targets.
So the big questions now are how long this will last and whether Turkey can really pick off PKK fighters without affecting the civilian population or engaging the legal security forces of the Kurdish Peshmerga. Turkish opinion is right behind this action at the moment, but if it goes on for weeks and weeks, the outside world may take a different view. Lawrence Lee, Al Jazeera in Istanbul.
Dr. Feryadin Rafik Hilmi is a former Kurdish cabinet minister. He says Turkey's operation is more about sending a message to the Kurds in northern Iraq than clamping down on separatist fighters.
I've always said this, that the PKK are not the only target or the whole target or even the prime target. I think that the target is the administration, the Kurdish administration in northern Iraq. PKK are not controlling any bridges, so why bomb the bridges? Why bomb the villages on the border? The aim of the Turkish government and military is to cut down to size the Kurdish administration, keep them on their toes, make sure that they have no ideas of Kosovo-type ideas of declaring independence. And I don't think it's going to be a successful operation because I don't think they can get rid of the PKK. PKK are actually 20 million Kurds in Turkey are all PKK supporters. Very few of them are against the PKK, so they will not succeed at all.
One of Iraq's most powerful militia groups has declared a further 6-month truce. The Mahdi army is led by influential Shia cleric Muqtada al-Sadr. An earlier ceasefire has been credited with contributing to a fall in violence across the country. From Baghdad, Mike Hanna reports.
At some 200 mosques throughout Iraq, the message is delivered. The ceasefire declared by Shia cleric Muqtada al-Sadr 6 months ago is to be extended. His powerful militia group, the Mahdi Army, instructed to continue observing a truce with US-led forces as well as with rival militia movements. The truce, one of the major factors in what has been a significant decrease in the level of conflict in recent months. The ceasefire was declared in August last year, after intense fighting between the Mahdi army and fellow Shiites from the rival Badr brigade resulted in more than 50 deaths. The violence all the more shocking because it occurred in the holy city of Karbala. Support for Muqtada al-Sadr has not waned during the period of ceasefire, and in his southern stronghold of Najaf, followers insist they will implicitly follow his orders. His decisions are always correct, says this man, and the past days have proved that. Muqtada al-Sadr knows everything, agrees another, and we will obey his decision. He is the leader, says a third, and we in the Mahdi army will follow. The announcement comes on the second anniversary of one of Iraq's blackest days. The bombing of a revered Shia shrine in Samarra on this day in 2006, sparking off nationwide sectarian violence, conflict that further deepened the fault lines in a society that had already begun appearing in the wake of the US-led invasion. The extension of the ceasefire, an encouragement to those who believe there can be an end to the conflict, and confirmation too, perhaps, that Iraqis themselves have the power to curb the violence. Mike Hanna, Al Jazeera, Baghdad.
The United States has ordered support staff and the families of diplomats at its embassy in Belgrade to leave after the building was set on fire during protests against Kosovo's independence. Kosovo's Prime Minister on Friday had denounced the protests as reminiscent of Slobodan Milosevic's wartime rule. And there have been more mass protests by ethnic Serbs in Kosovo's divided city of Mitrovica. United Nations police have been trying to keep 5,000 demonstrators off a key bridge which separates the Serbs and ethnic Albanians. Barnaby Phillips reports.
A diplomatic cleanup underway in Belgrade. The American embassy is the most damaged. The debris is being swept away, the cost of all this destruction being counted. The attack on the embassy appeared to catch the Serbian police off guard. The Americans are furious about the initial lack of protection and how long it took the police to control this situation.
The message was very clear, that the situation was intolerable, that they needed to act immediately to provide the adequate security forces so that our embassy compound and our personnel were not under attack.
These home video pictures are now on the internet. They show how many people in Belgrade took advantage of the chaos. Free-for-all looting. A complete breakdown in law and order. All over the city centre there has been looting. This McDonald's restaurant was attacked for the second time in 6 days. Now the crowds were looking for targets which they associate with the West and with the United States in particular. But the majority in this enormous crowd had no interest in violence. They and the government may now regret that the protest has been overshadowed by the chaos that followed.
Scenes of violence that we saw in Belgrade, which are highly regrettable. These were done by the extreme groups, not by the mainstream people who were participating, the hundreds of thousands of them who were participating in this process. It was just about the group of extreme factions, a number of small groups of extremists.
Long after the damage has been repaired, Serbia's sense of injustice will endure, that Kosovo has been taken illegally, that international law has been violated. Barnaby Phillips, Al Jazeera, Belgrade.
Russia has blamed supporters of Kosovo's independence for triggering embassy attacks in Belgrade. And Russia's envoy to NATO has warned the alliance and the EU that if they overstep their mandate in Kosovo, then Russia may be obliged to use, quote, brute force. Journalist Fred Weir in Moscow says the NATO ambassador's comments don't mean Russia's thinking of military action.
He's a hardline nationalist who was appointed NATO ambassador precisely to say things like that, to make provocative statements. And he didn't, in fact, say that Russia would use force in Kosovo. What he said was the Russian line, in fact, that NATO has used force by seizing Kosovo, occupying it, and if NATO now will allow Kosovo to be independent, it means that brute force rules the world and Russia will have to draw its own conclusions. I think that's basically what he said, and it's a little bit bone-chilling, but it's not a threat of imminent Russian force.
Israel has launched another airstrike on Gaza. At least 2 men identified as members of Islamic Jihad were killed in the attack on the Barej refugee camp. 190 people have been killed since Israeli and Palestinian peace talks resumed in November. And Israeli troops have fired tear gas and rubber-coated steel bullets at protesters demonstrating in the West Bank village of Bilaim.